Alien invasion, hip, hip, hooray. Rob Vader by the rob that Rolfie Congon. You know I can mind about it both thing. There go eat no boy said who I went batty and from him the mass. Hip hip hooray, the alien invasion, hip hip, ooh alien invasion, hip hip hooray, the alien invasion, hip hip hooray.
Wojciech Terlecki.
The alien invasion. Hip, hip, hooray. Thank you very much for all of you who have come to listen to me. Thanks to Pastor Robert for his hospitality. Let me introduce myself. My name is Argus Padamka. Before I started traveling around the country and testifying to the truth, I lived in the mountainous state of Montana. I embarked on this journey because I managed to obtain information explaining the reasons for the alien invasion. I don't like their reasons at all, and I know that when I reveal them, a whole bunch of people will be disappointed. Nevertheless, I must appeal, stop killing the aliens. You can boo and whistle, I'm used to it. I know that what I'm about to say may make people unhappy, but I can't keep it a secret. I don't care, I already know my truth, but it's about our grandchildren, and not just ordinary grandchildren, but grand, and many times grand-grandchildren. Yes, you can laugh. First, I must boast that I belong to Pastor Ordy's church, the one whose people killed the first alien 50 years ago. And it wasn't like they tell the story now. I was a little boy back then, but I remember there was no celebration. No fireworks, only adults got so drunk on corn moonshine that they couldn't resist the federal authorities who arrested the elders, including the pastor. Later, they had to release them all because the court ruled that there was no law for such a crime. The prosecutor suggested poaching, but our old, good judge explained that the community had the right to hunt anything that entered their land. The prosecutor said it didn't enter but flew in. But I won't continue this thread. Much later, when I learned the truth, I went to the federal authorities, and one of them, and several others examined me, asked me to tell the whole story of the alien invasion in my own words. At first, I didn't understand what they wanted from me because I don't have my own words. The aliens have their own words, I use the ones others use. They listened to me carefully, wrote something down, and said they would contact me. I thought they would tell the whole world what they heard from me, but they didn't. I recorded a video about it, but they deleted it, so I started my journey and tell what I know and how I see it. I remember that the story began on the day of my 4th birthday. Astronomers saw something at the edges of the solar system that they called an anomaly in the newspapers, and later it turned out to be an ordinary tunnel. Well, maybe not ordinary, but the kind the aliens dug to get to us. There was an unprecedented excitement among Earthlings. Most of them were happy, as if they had been waiting for it all their lives. They appeared on 3D TV, excited like they had just finished a bottle of whiskey, talking about how it would advance humanity. The pastor was skeptical about any progress, so he watched with a Martian expression and organized additional prayers just in case. But there were others, predicting imminent doom, not just heretics like Pastor Smart, who predicted the end of the world 3 months after the end of each leap year, just before Easter. When that didn't happen, he claimed that the prayer of his community saved the world. Allegedly, he even sent bills to the federal government, threatening that if they didn't pay, they would stop praying next time, and then the president would see, cry, and regret. Enough about the cursed apostates. Those who were seriously worried were the people who listened to what the brain in the jar said. This brain belonged to a wheelchair-bound professor in the past who knew more about space than anyone. Before he died, the scientist agreed to have his brain enclosed in a special container. This allowed him to continue to be wise in the virtual world. And from that virtual world, he predicted on TVs that contact with an alien civilization, one that could dig tunnels, would be the end of our civilization. Pastor Ordy didn't predict anything. He just said, whatever happens, happens, we'll see. These turned out to be wise and prophetic words because everyone can see that it happened as it happened, and it is as it is. Alien ships entered Earth's orbit a few months later, and problems with them started immediately. Travel agencies suffered a lot. People who bought trips to warm countries complained massively that something had blocked the sun for 2 whole weeks, and they didn't get any tan. Agencies, according to the agreements, were exempt from liability for natural disasters, but it was neither a disaster nor a natural event. Facing the prospect of long legal battles, they opted for settlements, which hit their pockets hard. Shortly after that, landers detached from the ships, and the first aliens set foot on our land. Actually, 4 feet. The legs supported a barrel-like torso, on top of which were eyes facing in all directions. From the body, grasping tentacles grew. Some long, others short. Some thick as an arm, others thin as a little finger. As it was later determined, the number and appearance of these appendages were a fundamental feature that allowed them to be distinguished from each other. However, I haven't heard of anyone who knew these beings well enough to give them names. Besides, why should I describe those creatures when everyone can see them, even in photos or on TV? Authorities prepared for the arrival of guests. Speeches were written, delegations were appointed, envoys received certain privileges, whatever that is, and clear guidelines. Groups of scientists placed their devices. The media directed their lenses to the sky, and everything would have gone dignified and solemn if it weren't for the fact that there were many aliens, very many, and their ships landed everywhere, without order. As observed, the vehicles were not very sophisticated, and landings were not smooth. Just a thud, some hatch fell, and the aliens leisurely crawled outside. At first, upon seeing Earthlings, the aliens hesitated as if waiting for something. People interpreted it as an encouragement to start a welcoming ceremony, but I now know it was something entirely different. But I won't tell you just yet because I see you finally started to listen to me, and I want to be heard until the end. After a moment of hesitation, delegations and representatives began their duties. As I mentioned, there were so many ships that theoretically, anyone from the president to the mayor could organize their welcoming committee. In France, it was ordered that no one, under any circumstances, should approach the aliens. This privilege was to be reserved for the head of state. That's when the first incident occurred. The delegation took its place near the nearest ship. They waited for the arrivals to crawl out, and the president could deliver a welcoming speech containing Masonic slogans like liberty, equality, and fraternity. He started talking and talking, but the aliens didn't respond because, as it turned out later, it wasn't their custom. They stood and stared in all directions with those peculiar eyes. An awkward silence ensued. Following the script, the First Lady pushed her little son toward the nearest alien with a white rose and a tricolor flag. The little one didn't want to go, but he had no choice. With tears in his eyes, step by step, he approached the creature. As the nation watched in front of their TVs, the alien didn't disappoint expectations. It opened up and, with one snap, engulfed the boy along with the flower and flag. Understanding that something had happened, the president, wisely refraining from hasty interpretations, gestured to the guards not to shoot the creature. The highest representative of the proud republic accepted the possibility of a sacrifice. Fortunately, there was an ordinary constable nearby, who, having a son of a similar age, instinctively reacted. He rushed to the alien and started beating it with his official baton. The creature, under the influence of the blows, maybe not, opened its being and returned the glue-covered boy. The president's sobbing son was, as they said on TV, taken under psychological care. I don't know what they did to him. Maybe they gave him a bath? Fortunately, nothing so bad has ever happened to me that I would need to be embraced by psychological care. Sometimes I get the blues and think that in the arms of a professional prostitute, I would find solace. I apologize, Reverend Pastor, it's just a joke. In any case, this event changed the behavior of the aliens. It was as if a global signal passed through their ugly bodies, and they became more active. They approached people who tried to get out of their way. The aliens became like Latinos, closing the gap intrusively and without permission. They approached a person as close as possible, and while a Mexican wants to chat with a person and then steal from them, what about the aliens? It wasn't clear what they were up to. They pressed their bodies and stared with their mirror-like gaze. People worldwide were helpless and increasingly nervous. It was different for us. Pastor Orty, the enlightened one, prepared us for the meeting with the aliens. Before the first vehicle landed, he gave us clear instructions on how to behave, encapsulated in 3 simple points. 1. If you see an alien ship, first, from hiding, throw a stone, cone, or other small object at it. 2. If you encounter no disturbing reaction, poke it with a stick and see what happens. 3. Only then can you risk touching the object. We didn't have much to do with spaceships. The vehicles were taken over by the military on the first night after landing. How disappointed the federal authorities were when they found out they weren't equipped with any weapons. However, when the first oddities appeared in our fields, they were accurately pelted with acorns and prodded with sticks. At first, it seemed like nothing special would come of it, but after a while, the beings started retaliating and threw found objects at passing people. Some even tried to smack someone with branches. Whatever one might say, the kids had great fun for a few days. The situation changed dramatically when one of the unwanted visitors completely destroyed Angus Johansson's cornfield. The old man was over 80, and in the course of his long life, he had lost his sense of humor. In winter, he came up with a new recipe for moonshine and couldn't wait to harvest enough grain to try it out. Unfortunately, when it came time for the harvest, he saw an alien on his field, tearing off corn cobs and stuffing them into its body. This was too much for the old man. He returned to the barn, appeared in the field with pitchforks to drive away the intruder. However, the alien wasn't frightened, and upon seeing a human, transformed its tentacles into blowpipes, with corn grains as ammunition. Old Johansson was shot by a series of blows from several tentacles, and more out of surprise than fear, he intended to retreat to the cottage. Unfortunately, he tripped and fell to the ground. The passing Pastor Orty, seeing this, thought that the old Johansson had been murdered by the visitor. The clergyman's peacekeeper ended up in his hands, and before the owner realized it, 6 lead bullets pierced the alien's body. They say that a weapon itself doesn't kill. At the sight of this, old Angus revived, stood up straight, and with energy not expected from people his age, he hacked the motionless body with pitchforks lying on the field. Then hell broke loose. As I mentioned, some of our people were arrested but quickly released. As we thought, the aliens came for revenge. They appeared in the area in droves. Armed federal agents didn't allow us to kill them. Soon, aliens were wandering every street and backyard. On seeing people, they gathered and bumped into them, pushed, blocked the way. When someone forgot to close the doors to their house, they could expect 2 or even more aliens to enter without hesitation, exploring every nook and cranny. It took a few strong guys to throw them out. A group even formed, initially voluntarily removing aliens from premises. Then they started charging fees for the trouble. That's how they made a living until their wives began to complain. They couldn't even go to the chicken coop without a few aliens barging into their homes, as the men were not there, only spending their extra earnings in the pub. To silence the wives of the alien removers, it was decided that men would first tidy up their own premises before work. For this purpose, they visited each other, which only exacerbated the problem, as hospitality required offering a treat, and refusal would be an insult. The more corn whiskey was consumed during these internal missions, the more tolerance grew for the intruders. People said, "Oh, let them wander, they don't steal money, and they don't defecate on the carpet. If the women want to throw something out of the house, let them put the cat outside and not bother us." Indeed, there was a problem with cats because when they saw an alien, they bristled and screamed horribly. It was unbearable. Interestingly, aliens seemed to enjoy these feline concerts because whenever a fur ball started howling, it immediately attracted a few extraterrestrials. Were they music enthusiasts or something? One morning, the county sheriff arrived and reported that new unwelcome guests were slowly but inevitably heading our way. Pastor already prayed for a long time and then made a decision. Our congregation had to evacuate to the mountains for a while. Harvest was over, and there was some time before the next planting. Everyone was to find shelter among the mountain peaks because, as the pastor wisely assumed, beings with their short legs wouldn't be able to reach there. And so our exodus began. It didn't last long, just a few hours, but it was still an exodus. We set up camps, and we probably would have stayed there until this day if it hadn't been for the event that put an end to the first alien invasion. I don't know the details, but since you're asking, I'll tell you what I read about it. Allegedly, a poor young man from Sicily earned some money smuggling black market goods and wanted to invite his heart's chosen one to an exquisite dinner. The girl reluctantly agreed. They agreed that she didn't have to give ass in return, so no commitments. Reverend, that's how it was, what can I say? The young man ordered the finest wine and some super spaghetti or whatever they have on the fancy menu. Unfortunately, a few aliens infiltrated the restaurant and wandered aimlessly between the tables. At one point, one of the beings stopped at the young couple's table and, without much thought or after some thought, who knows, absorbed the meal along with the drink. The guy got upset and started yelling at the waiter that it was a scandal and he wouldn't pay for the meal. Unfortunately for him, the waiter was the former, or current, boyfriend of the girl, and she fucked him up, calling him a miser and a poor guy not worth dealing with. Reverend, well, she yelled at him. The whole situation was observed, to his detriment, by a well-fed, or not, you can't determine that, alien. The distraught guy stood up straight and thrust the knife lying on the table into the alien's body. He repeated the act multiple times, until he got tired. The restaurant guests, including local mobsters, watched his efforts. After a few minutes of such a massage, the creature softened and fell to the ground, showing all the signs of death. The local gangsters immediately used their smartphones, proposing a new service involving the definitive disposal of aliens. However, they couldn't take advantage of the opportunity for easy money because the restaurant guests, armed with whatever they found in the kitchen, poured out into the streets. And that's how the event later called the Night of Kitchen Knives began. From your joyful cheers, I gather that you know what I'm talking about. Photos and live reports of these events excited Earth's residents tired of unwelcome guests. People worldwide, regardless of the time of day and guided only by instructions on social media, began to deal with the aliens. By sunrise, not a single living alien remained on Earth. People walked the streets until noon, peering into every alley, and in the villages, into every nook. When it turned out that there was no living alien anywhere, a several-day-long celebration began, mistakenly associated with our congregation and old Johansson, the killer of aliens, who had long since passed away. May the Lord watch over his soul. Amen. We didn't know about this because we were hiding in the mountains at that time. And when we learned what happened, we returned to our premises. We sorted everything out, restored flocks of chickens and sheep. When I grew up and was looking for a wife, news spread that near the solar system, alien ships had reappeared. This time, only exceptional lunatics were excited about the upcoming visit. Losses caused by the previous visit of the aliens were tallied. There were fears that the next mission was revenge for the massacre of the previous expedition, especially since at first glance, there were many more ships. Those who believed that we would be enriched culturally and technologically by the aliens, as it was said, admitted that landing ships were nothing more than pieces of metal without propulsion, and what was in orbit was slowly descending and spectacularly burning up in the atmosphere. I must remind you that sometimes some poorly burned parts fell and caused damage, as it matters. Keeping in mind what happened 25 years ago, Earthlings decided that they wouldn't let invaders roam around their backyards and test the hospitality of the human race. A clear message was sent to the invading fleet in all known languages: get the fuck out of here. The signal was ignored. Just like before, the invasion fleet appeared in orbit. This time, many units immediately turned into fiery balls under the influence of orbital anti-aircraft defense actions. However, most ships managed to release landers, and the fleet of fighter jets scattered them to pieces until they ran out of ammunition. People went crazy with joy, watching the coordinated attacks of the United Armed Forces. Losses among the defenders were insignificant and occurred only due to accidents or uncoordinated fire, which hit their own and allied units. I don't need to mention that many aliens did reach Earth. The army and volunteers effectively dealt with them. Whoever could, shot, cut, stabbed, burned, ran over any alien that came their way. After several days of intense work on Earth, no living extraterrestrial beings remained. It was a good thing because everyone had run out of ammunition. The corpses of the creatures also disappeared, as in the Earth's atmosphere, they quickly turned into powder, which, as later determined by North Korean scientists, had a perfect effect on the growth of leguminous plants. People celebrated again, but we did not. When we heard about the alien invasion again, the pastor, who was still alive at that time, allowed himself to be persuaded by Brain in a Jar, who kept giving wise advice on television, that this time we would be wiped out from the surface of the Earth within a few seconds. So, we quickly packed and moved to the mountains. After the apocalypse, the pastor planned to rebuild the human population there and even intended to sacrifice himself, actively participating in this noble mission. Apparently, he managed to persuade the young daughter of the baker to cooperate. Unfortunately for them, a little more than a week after our second exodus, signals reached us that it was all over. The pastor was very disappointed and distrustful. He claimed it was surely enemy propaganda. We believed the old man. After all, he wasn't wrong the first time. It was decided that I would go down to the village and see what was happening there. So, I embarked on an expedition and gained knowledge that I will now share with you, although I don't have much hope that you'll listen to me. I was very cautious and approached the village in the evening. There was no trace of the aliens, but the pastor's house was open, and someone was inside. I peered through the window and understood that it wasn't a human. I mean, it had hands and legs, was dressed in a beautiful, floor-length gown. Long, light hair cascaded down to its shoulders, and a mysterious glow emanated from its figure. I thought it might be an alien in disguise or some other species. I took a rope from the barn used to tie calves, and when the creature turned around to look into the pot on the stove, I jumped into the room and skillfully tied the guy, seating him on a pitchfork. We made eye contact. I didn't know what to say in such situations, so I greeted politely, took out a double-barreled shotgun from under my armpit, and asked if he knew what it was. The creature looked at me with its beautiful, neither male nor female face, and smiled. Its smile warmed my heart, and I suddenly felt hot and a bit sweaty. "Who are you?" I asked the second question. "My name is unpronounceable in your language, but the enlightened Pastor Ron Hubbard called me Isle." "Weird name," I said. "I am of noble lineage, and the more vowels in the name, the more dignified it sounds in your ears." "And what are you looking for here?" I asked rudely, not caring much about the significance of the letters. "I am the supervisor of your planet on behalf of the Galactic Council." "Does that mean you work for the feds or what?" The creature blinked in surprise, but after a moment, it understood and nodded its head. "Great. So let me ask, is it true that there are no more aliens here?" The guest didn't answer, he was thinking about something again. Eventually, he smiled sweetly and said, "Well, there are a few aliens, but as for the invasion of the Rygrogers, they are all dead now." Rygrh. Ugly, annoying, four-eyed creatures wandering everywhere in large quantities? Yes, them. The most numerous and one of the oldest races in the universe. So it's them. The most numerous and one of the oldest races in the universe. Well, there's a bit fewer of them now, I chuckled, patting my thigh. I hope they've learned their lesson and won't show up here again. Of course, they'll show up, the creature shrugged. In 24 years, 3 months, 3 days, and 7 hours. Then they'll get their asses kicked again. I proudly displayed my double-barreled shotgun. Well, as I expect, I'll also get. That's something. I looked at him in surprise. What, we're just chatting here. For a moment, I thought about untying him, but I concluded that it was too early. At least not until I figure out what gender he is, if you catch my drift. That's strange, said the creature. Because from my calculations, I will die here. No way. We don't kill everything that moves. I felt offended on behalf of humanity. You are a fortunate species, you still have significant potential for killing, which would be a shame not to use, the creature said. We do what we can. I replied reflexively. But wait, how's that? Those who come to you have already exhausted their killing potential. Their civilization conquered death ages ago, so nothing reduces their population. Fortunately, they intercepted radio and television broadcasts from Earth. Your history impressed them. The wars, crimes, sophisticated murders, and common homicides. They calculated the human potential and concluded that you would help them regulate their population. The old ones, tired of life, who have experienced everything there is to experience and achieved everything that can be achieved, will regularly come to you and use your killing resources. I didn't quite understand what he said, but it worried me that someone planned to use our resources and tamper with the pool of something. But we don't agree to that. I protested. If they feel so bad, why don't they just kill themselves? The creature remained silent. Don't you want to answer? I am gathering the necessary words to explain it. Will it take long? The laws of physics do not allow them to kill or inflict death upon themselves. Space-time is looped and contains a large but limited number of events. These are the basics of quantum physics, which you have only recently begun to explore. But what does that have to do with? I became suspicious that this guy was messing with me. In the available Rygruger loops, all cases of murder and suicide are already closed sets. New elements cannot be created or added. That killed my enthusiasm. I didn't quite understand what he meant until I remembered what the good book says. Then I understood that these poor beings didn't receive free will from God. They could only act within the limits set by Providence. When they deviated, and their civilization became displeasing to the Creator, they came here to fulfill life. But on the other hand, it wasn't fair that someone would exploit us like that. Does that mean we won't be allowed to kill either? Nobody forbids anyone to kill. To explain this, I need to introduce a bit of simple math. The things that can happen form a limited set. After exhausting the elements of the set of events, everything in the universe starts over. Sometimes certain categories of events are exhausted earlier than others, but it applies mostly to very old civilizations. It's like evolution, which needs millions of years before its effects can be observed. Fortunately, you are a young civilization and have much to experience. I ignored the mention of Darwinian heresy because something else caught my interest, and these beings steal our killing? They utilize your pool. That's why, in 5 billion years, you won't be able to take anyone's life either. I came here for inspection. To ensure that the aliens, as you call them, don't excessively deplete your reservoir of events. It relieved me a bit, but the distaste lingered. And then, I understood that the Almighty entrusted me with a mission. I decided to inform people not to let themselves be fooled for free. We could get something out of it, negotiate, but only if we restrain our impulsiveness. As I contemplated this, I looked at the entity, and it seemed attractive to me. Well, okay, last question, are you a guy or a gal? I have no gender. That is, no reproductive organs, if that's what you mean. We haven't reproduced in that way for hundreds of millions of years. We've already tested all genetic combinations and now replicate the best ones. I stood up and approached the alien. It smelled nice. I regretted it wasn't a gal. I cut the string with a knife and told it to leave because more people would show up soon. There would be a celebration, and anything could happen then. I didn't want us to share the fate of Sodom. And you probably won't believe it, but as the released one walked out, I heard a whistle and saw light. Then there was a loud noise, and a wave of heat passed through the room. A sizable crater smoked in the backyard, and there was no trace of the entity. I got scared that it was too late for Gomorrah, but fortunately, no fires of divine wrath fell to Earth, only part of the alien ship. It happens. There's a lot of that junk orbiting in low orbits. And that's all I have to say. According to the creature's prophecy, in a few days, aliens will appear again in our solar system to plunder us of killing. Listen to the old storyteller and think about what you should do. Silence fell. People looked at each other and pondered something. What do you think about this? The man in camo asked his friend standing beside him. Should we stop killing them? The other one thought for a moment. Suddenly, the listeners experienced enlightenment. An idea appeared in their heads. A thought that united them in this solemn moment. A concept born from the experiences of previous invasions. We need to rush to Walmart and buy ammunition before the prices go up.
Hip hip hooray, the alien invasion, hip hip, ooh, alien invasion, hip hip hooray, the alien invasion, hip hip hooray. Van wat die zieken hebben doden of vis had je en dergelijke en lopen hoe nodig hoe hip hip hooray the alien invasion hip hip hoe hip hooray the alien invasion hip